Welcome back to the virtual hangar. Today we're going to learn how to knit. Even if you've never knitted before, this washcloth is a super simple starter project. Your kit will include one paper pattern, one pair of knitting needles, and one ball of yarn. Probably will look a little different or in a different color. Let's start here by looking at the pattern. I included the pattern a couple different ways. If you've never knitted before, the stitch chart here at the bottom is probably going to look a little bit wild. We'll get back to it later. But for now, you can just look at the top piece of paper. Don't get intimidated. You're going to be all right. We are going to start with our yarn. The first thing we're going to learn how to do is actually just tie a quick slip knot here. You do want to do a yarn tail that is about 3 times the length of your knitting needle. And then we are going to tie a simple slip knot right about there. So you wrap the yarn around your finger into a nice X like that. Then we are going to pull the tail end up through that loop, tighten it. And the nice thing about a slip knot, of course, is that you can adjust the length of the knot or just pull it right out. So we're going to do it one more time just to show you. Pull a quick slip knot with a tail about 3 times the length of the knitting needle. This is called a long tail cast on. We are going to learn how to cast on. When we cast on, we actually are going to take the tail end of our yarn in over our thumb and the yarn ball end over our index finger, twist it around like that, and then grab the tail with your other fingers. I always try really hard to describe everything as well as I can. This one is definitely more of a visual, and I'm sorry about that. You're going to go up through the loop around your thumb and up around the loop that's by your index finger, pull tight, and that's how you cast on. Let's do it one more time. There you go. We're going to cast on 42, and I'm going to do it in super fast motion here with movie magic. If you have never knit before and you are a left-hander, you can try and knit along with me on your left hand. We're going to count the stitches here to make sure I've got 42. I did a few too many. Count them again. If it's just too difficult to knit this way with your left hand, check the video description. You can actually watch this video mirrored and follow along that way. All right, so now we're going to knit our first row. The first row, we're just going to knit all the way across. If you've never knitted before, what you do is you take, with the stitches in your left hand, the needle in your right hand, you're going to go from the front, put it through the first loop, wrap the yarn around, and then pull that wrap through the loop to make your stitch. So once you've wrapped your yarn over, you pull that loop and then pull the loop from your left hand off of the needles. Let's go a little closer so you can see. So here we go from the front. We go through the loop, wrap the yarn around, pull that wrap from the back needle to the front, and then pull the original loop off the left hand needle. If you are left-handed and watching the mirrored version of this video, just remember that I'm describing everything from the right-handed point of view. So if you need to turn the audio off, that's totally okay. And if you need additional help, you can always stop by the hangar at the library and we can see what we can do. So you can see there I wrapped in a different direction. It really doesn't matter if you wrap the yarn around the needle from the front or the back, as long as you do it the same way every time. Don't be afraid. These first couple of knits will probably be a little funky if you've never tried it before. Don't be afraid to pull the whole thing out and try again. Or if the first part is lumpy, who cares? All right, so we've knit 42. That's our first row. It'll probably not look like much. It'll probably look just like this, but it's obviously not very big yet. When you finish that first row, you can see that all of these stitches are on the right needle and you've got nothing on the left. You're going to go ahead and switch hands, and now all the stitches are back on the left and we got an empty needle on the right. For the next 3 rows, we're just going to knit all the way across. This is called a garter stitch. It's where you knit on both sides. And what I mean by that is we just turn the work all the way around. So when you go right to left or left to right, you're really always going left to right, right? No matter what, we are just going to knit those first 4 rows, a little bit of movie magic here, and this should be about what it would look like here. So if you lose track, I just kind of want you to be able to see the knit. A single knit stitch kind of has that heart shape from one side. It'll look pretty much the same on one side versus the other. And then the back side kind of has that lump. So you can tell we did those 4 rows. And now we're going to start the actual pattern. We're always going to start every row of the pattern by knitting 4, just basic knitting, doesn't matter what side. We're going to do a 4-stitch border essentially around the whole washcloth, and it's all going to be garter stitch. So we're doing 4 knits here to start the pattern. As you get more work done on this, you'll find it's easier to squish kind of the stitches up towards the points of the needle. That's kind of one of the things that comes with practice, getting comfortable holding the needles and the thread and how you actually move the stitches from needle to needle. That was really tough for me to start. All right, we're going to get into purling here. The first kind of different stitch that we've done, a purl is the same thing as a knit, but you're going to do it from the back to the front. So I took the needle in from the back side to the loop, wrapped it around and pulled it to the front. I'm going to do a second one here. From the back, we're going to go through the loop towards the front, wrap the yarn over, and then pull that yarn to the back again and pull the stitch off the left needle. This pattern is basically knit 2, purl 2 the whole time. So I'm going to knit 2 really fast here so that we can get back and I can show you the purl again because you haven't done that. So here we are again. I went through from the back, wrap around, and then pull that loop to the front. Then I'm going to do it again, wrap, pull that loop to the front, and I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, or whatever order it was in, all the way until the end of this row. So you can see I've got my 4 stitches here, the garter stitch. The knit will have the like bump kind of farther away from the needle, and the purl will have it closer to the needle. So if you put it down and come back again later and you forget what stitch you're on, you can kind of tell it's always going to be 2 or 4 of knit or purl. And if you can kind of start to identify which stitch is which, it'll be easier to pick it up and come back to it later. Okay, so when we get to the end of that knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, whatever it was, we're going to do 4 more regular knit stitches to finish out the border for that row. And then we are going to take a look at it, make sure we've got our nice border, and then turn the work over, switch hands, and we are going to do row 6. We're going to knit 4, which I write the pattern, you're like, well, that should have been knit 6, shouldn't it have been? Well, yes, but it's easier, I think, to think of it as you always are knitting 4 at the beginning and the end. And then whether you start with the knit or the purl affects the pattern in the center of the washcloth outside of the border. So here I finished the first 2. And the last row, you could tell we started with the purl, and this one we started with the knit. So the knit ones from this side will kind of have that little heart shape, and that's the purl. So that's the knit, that's the purl. And those squares we're now going to do in reverse and kind of make this nice checkerboard pattern. So row 7, we're going to actually do the same thing that we did for row 6, but because we have turned the work, the checkerboard pattern switches. You can see I'm going quite fast, not only because the video kept going out of focus because it's hard to knit over a table, but because knitting and purling is all that knitting is. If you've got your knit and your purl, as long as you can keep track of the pattern, you know how to knit, baby. Row 8, we're going to knit 4, do our pattern. We're going to start by purling 2 and then knitting 2 and repeating that through the end of the center checkerboard section, and then finishing off that row with 4 more knits. Once you have finished this row, which should be just about now, you can see this is basically the whole pattern. So I've got these first 2 rows here with the checkerboard on one side and the other. So I am going to skip ahead here a little bit because for rows 9 through 52, You are just repeating those 4 rows in order to continue the checkerboard pattern. So let's actually take a look here at the pattern so you can see a little better. Each checkerboard is made of 4 stitches. That's the 4 knit ones there, and this is the 4 purls. And if we flip the work over, there are also 4 knits and then 4 purls, but that is because a purl is just the back side of a knit, the back side of water. That's a Jungle Cruise joke. So let's take a look at this pattern, which I know is a little bit wild. I've got the written part here at the top, which is just in the caption of the video as we've been going row by row, but I've also got the stitch chart there at the bottom in case you're more of a visual learner. And sometimes knitted patterns will be written this way. You're always going to read a stitch chart from the bottom of the work. This is the key here. There's an O for the knit on the right side, an underlined O for knitting from the wrong side, an X for the purl on the right side, an X with an umlaut with the purl from the wrong side. So you can see it's always O's because you knit the 4 border stitches. So I've got the bottom 4 rows, the outside 4 stitches. When you are knitting right to left, you are going to knit from the with the regular O's, and then the wrong side you would also knit, but it will look like a purl. So what I tried to do here is shaded the checkers the same color if at the end of everything they would all look the same. So you've got this lighter, which will look like the purls from the front, and then the darker ones, which will look like the knits from the front. But the reason that this is so confusing is because you knit by flipping your work over and then switching from side to side, and you can't do that when you write it down on a piece of paper. So hopefully you can see here, you would go this way when you start on an odd number row. So this knit, stitch, knit, knit, purl those 2, and then knit those 2. So even though you're switching stitch direction row to row, the different shades on the pattern represent ones that face the same way. So let me show you really quick. Let me get to the other side so that I can show you when you are on an even number row. Here we are. Okay, so on an even number row, right, because technically the work has been flipped in reverse. So knit, 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 purl, knit, right? We are doing that kind of in reverse, right? So the first box on the row 6 pattern does represent the first stitch, but the second one goes to the one next to the right, and then the third one goes next to the right, and the fourth one goes next to the right. Knit, knit, and then purl, purl. So I'm sure that you guys must get the point by now. I'm sure I've over-explained it and made it way too complicated. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, absolutely. But just in case, I thought if you were maybe more visual, you might like a different way of looking at patterns. But anyways, you're going to repeat that 4-row pattern a total of 12 times. So after the first 2 that are written out, or the first set that's written out, you are going to do a total of 12. So whichever box you've got there, you're going to count that there's 12, and then you know we're moving on to row 53. The last 4 rows of the washcloth, we are just going to garter stitch again. We are going to knit all 4 rows all the way across. Once we've got our last 4 rows done, we are ready to finish our work. So we are going to bind off all 42 stitches. To do that, you're going to start just the same way you would as if you were knitting. Needle from the front to the back, yarn over and pull that loop to the front. Pull that stitch off of the left hand. And then what we do is start a second one. Pull the first loop on the right hand, so the first stitch you did. We're going to pull it over the second loop, basically to seal it off, which is why it's sort of called binding off. It's sometimes also called casting off. You're going to take the left needle, put it through the first loop, hold the second stitch, and then pull the first loop over the second loop. Let me do it again from a little bit closer because my camera went out of focus. Let's try again here. So we've got our first stitch, which is the second stitch from the last step. We basically knit one, and then after we finish the knit, we pull the first stitch on the right hand over the second stitch on the right hand, and you're going to do that with the left needle. Again, we're going to do it one more time because you almost couldn't see it there either. We're going to go just knit, pull it off, take the first loop on the right hand, pull it over the second one, and there it is. You can see as you continue that you will always only have 1 or 2 on the right hand as you keep going. And then eventually you get to the end and you've run out of stitches. There's only 1. Don't worry about this being perfect your first time. It's pretty tough. You'll get into the rhythm of it by the end. But the important thing is if you get to the end, you bind them all off, that stops your work from unraveling. So we're going to do a little movie magic here to get to the end of the row. Once you've gotten to the last one, we've got just 1 or 2 left here. I'm going to wrap around, wrap that second one, pull it over the loop. There we are. I've got 1 left. That last loop, I'm going to pull a little bit longer just so I have a little bit more room to work with it, just because I think it's easier and also I'm trying to show you. I'm going to take some scissors, just cut that off from the yarn ball, stick that through the last loop, doesn't matter from which side at all. You're just trying to catch it just like that. And then we're going to go to the other end with the original tail, just tie it in a knot, trim it close, and do the same thing on the other side. And believe it or not, that is all there is to it. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to us on social media, and I will see you next time.